Hello again, everyone. This is Dan the Man. As you may have noticed, I'm a little later than usual with this video due to personal issues, so unlike the last video and future videos most likely, I'll be covering all the way up to nominations this time instead of ending with the head of household winner. So with that, let's begin. We had what was a mostly predictable but slightly interesting week. Likely the effects this week will be felt in the weeks to come. I'll say it right now, Paulie was a cocky idiot this week. His backdoor plan was pointless and a classic example of players these days backdooring just for the sake of backdooring. There were multiple ways his plan could have gone wrong. Victor could have won veto and taken Paul off, and then he would have been completely screwed. Tiffany also came a lot closer to going home instead. And while it was never really any likelihood as the week played out, it was not out of the question the House would have flipped and voted out Bronte instead, who was only up because Paulie put her up. If Paulie had wanted to break up Paul and Victor, he should have just put up Paul and Victor. As it was, he ticked off 3 people instead of 2, and 2 of them are staying. Had the House voted out Tiffany, which was talked about more than once, he would have had 3 people mad at him, all 3 still in the House. And now because he jerked him around, if Victor wins his way back in the House, he will have even more reason to go after Paulie. It worked out for Paulie, but it was an unnecessary risk that served no real purpose except for him to show off and apparently enjoy watching Victor be made a chump. And as for Tiffany, she got lucky. That girl is way too much like her sister. To be fair, all of the girls and some of the guys have cried and gotten paranoid at this point, so it's not unique to Tiffany. But when she is going to inevitably be compared to her sister, it's not good to be showing how many negative traits seem to run in the family. I'm surprised James and Devon didn't pull the trigger and take out Tiffany. They had to be getting some serious flashbacks to last year. Vanessa owed a lot more of her doing so well to luck than most believe, especially her fans. But being a basket case is not likely to do so well a second time, and even then it's not like that won Vanessa the game. Tiffany needs to put her emotions in check, or it will not end well for her. So is Victor the right choice to go? Well, for the 8-pack who controlled the vote, he was the strongest physical threat, and the most likely to win in future challenges, so he was likely the right choice. I'd argue Bronte has an in with 2 other girls and better social skills, and a slightly better handle on playing Big Brother, so I think they might have been better off to get her out. But I think between the guys being more in your face and girls desperate to finally win this thing, it made them overlook Bronte for the time being. Which brings us to the head of household. I was worried when earlier in the week on the feeds, the 8-pack had basically come to the realization they could just throw it to one of their own and be safe every week for the immediate future. But after the chaos Frank, Tiffany, and Devon unleashed, the alliance fractured and everyone stopped being in a hurry to throw it. On top of that, BB delivered a comp that was hard to throw to one person, especially since players outside the 8-pack stayed in the competition and no one competed as teams, so James and Frank couldn't have just thrown it for their teams, even if they did still want to. And by the BB gods, Bridget won. Or even more accurately, someone not in the damn 8-pack won, and we can finally stop with this autopilot crap. The one downside is, true to most people's predictions, Frank pretty much controlled the votes. While they didn't show it, Frank did initially push for Bridget to put up Bronte, which she shut down, so she didn't completely follow his lead. But while there are worse choices than Tiffany for Bridget to put up, it works out better for Frank than for Bridget, because while Tiffany has been seen making snide comments about Bridget when no one else is around, Tiffany seems to be open to working with Bronte and Natalie, so she likely would not have put her crosshairs on Bridget. And Paul and Bridget were tight, so target or not, she didn't help her relationship with someone who had been her ally. The good side for Bridget is everyone seems to be blaming Frank, which means he'll likely get all the backlash. Hell, barring Frank, Michelle, or Paulie winning, Frank will likely go up next week, and Paulie and Michelle probably would put up Frank too if they weren't on the same team. If the team part ends next week, Frank will likely be the target if anyone but him wins. And as usual, Frank is oblivious to this. It baffles me how, even with the sweetheart edit, that boy seems to never have a clue what is going on. He may be older than last time, but he sure isn't any wiser. Speaking of Frank drama, Devon needs to get her emotions in check. She has a legit complaint with Frank, because he's a legitimate jackass, but he's not doing anything with her the other girls haven't had to put up with, and while I think the House is sympathetic to Devon, her not being able to keep it in check while dealing with the same thing everyone else is having to may make others think she's not a good person to keep around long term. Devon's always had trouble dealing with people who are not the types she's used to being around in real life. But in a game where social interaction is the most important thing, that's not a good trait to have if you can't keep it under control. And then there is the roadkill competition. Frank won again, which was good for him but only makes him a bigger target. He should have thrown it, especially since he was in no danger of going home. Putting up Bronte may help ensure Tiffany goes home, although it might not. But with most of the house knowing he won, it will likely go back to Bronte and the other spy girls, thus burning more bridges with Frank. So who will go home this week? Tiffany seems likely. The house was almost as over her as they were Frank, and Paul and Bronte are not seen as big threats. So her time may be up, barring a veto win. But at the same time, the house is so against Frank, it knows Tiffany would target him, so they may do it just to spite Frank. Although if they do that, Frank will likely know the 8-pack has turned on him. I say likely because he's really not that bright or that aware of what the hell goes on around him. And if that happens, Frank's then going to go all out to win the HOH. And Frank is hard to beat even when he doesn't think his back is against the wall. Personally, I think the majority of the house would be smart to get rid of Bronte. She may be in the minority, but she has good social skills and is good at comps even though she hasn't won that many so far. And she also has 2 rock-solid allies. Against a guy with no allies, and a girl who's the second least liked in the house, Bronte would seem like the bigger threat. But while the house wants Frank out, and knows Tiffany could help with that, I think they'll be afraid to tip him off they have turned on him right before the head of household competition. Especially to save someone everyone was doubting anyway. She may not be Vanessa, but she's a lot like her sister. And saving Vanessa, when they had early chances to get her out, was a mistake a lot of people paid for last season. So while it's not locked in as much as last week, I think Tiffany's luck may have run out. One thing's for certain. If Frank or one of his teammates doesn't win on Thursday, he's in for a long week, and the high he's been on so far will come to a very abrupt halt. I'll be back after Thursday's eviction episode for my thoughts on the eviction and the next head of household. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.